Hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Govs on the Go, the Legacy Series, which features some of the retired professors we have in the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzzoon. I'm the Dean of the College. I'm also the host of the podcast. We are recording today's episode here in beautiful Mabry Hall in the Music Mass Comm building, and it's only fitting that while we're in the Mabry Hall, that we have both Doctors George and Sharon Mabry as our guests. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
And once again, I'd just like to take a moment to thank the Department of Communication for allowing us to be part of their production schedule and recording this. And of course, we are here in this facility, which is just wonderful. And you were both very familiar with this. But we are on stage and we have an empty audience behind us because we wanted to provide just a different perspective. And I'm sure this is something that you noticed when you were a performer.
Yes, I mean this auditorium has the most wonderful acoustics, and as a singer in this auditorium, when you're standing in the middle of the stage, you can hear yourself well, you can hear the pianist well, the audience can hear you, and that's unique.
I've been accused by some of my colleagues that this building, this beautiful hall, was meant for choral singing, and it is, because it has such great resonance and balconies, and when we were doing choral concerts, I could have them in the balconies and all around, and it was just wonderful.
Yeah. So I wanted to have you both on the podcast. Now, when I first came, I had Sharon, you were a guest on the Faculty Spotlight, but I figured it would be nice to have you both on in case I need to have a clarification for any of the answers. Or for our audience, just to let you know, I'll be sort of alternating questions back and forth as we tell their stories independently until they join up together, and also have that part of how their stories have intertwined. So I'm going to begin with George, okay? And I think we're going to begin with your backstory. You were born in Atlanta, raised in Chattanooga. And so when did music become sort of an important part of your development?
I think it was just an everyday occurrence. My mother woke up singing, my father played bad harmonica, and there was music all around the house. When I was 9 years old, they bought a piano. They put me at the piano, and that was not a good thing to do, but and then elementary school, I was so lucky because I had music 5 days a week for 30 minutes with a music specialist, and never will forget her. Her daughter played the flute. So it was constant exposure all the way through high school, singing, playing percussion instruments. And then I got involved in the theater work, and all of a sudden I'm singing and I'm on stage, and it's just wonderful. And I'm going, wow, this is something I'd like to do for the rest of my life.
And that was in high school when you're?
Yeah.
And there was, I think, a teacher that you had mentioned in high school.
Oh, there were several.
Yeah.
My choral mentor was Jay Craven. Jewel Tilson was my instrumental mentor, and then there was this wonderful lady by the name of Betty Perucci, whose mother and father were on the vaudeville circuit. So Betty was the one who directed the musical shows that I was in, Oklahoma, Mary and Sam and Little Abner, and she taught me more about how to be on stage and what being an actor can do for a singer, and vice versa. So yes, it was very, very influential.
And now looking back after all these years, I'm wondering, did you see a connection that having this opportunity to be on stage and to be involved with drama helped you as a musician, but also as a conductor?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. Being able to present to a chorus or a group of people, a dynamic group, is in a very dramatic way, an emotional way, an intellectual way, and coming out of yourself, being able to get into the music and convey that to the group. I always found that having been on stage and having had the direction from her and other directors along the line, yes, there's no doubt about it. I'm very thankful for the stage time that I've had.
Now, Sharon, you grew up in Newport, Tennessee. You credit your piano and voice teacher with assisting in your early development. Can you kind of tell how she helped you?
Yes, I feel extremely lucky to have had a teacher who was so well qualified, who was so caring, who was so kind, who was a fantastic pianist in a small town like Newport, because there were about 12,000 people there. It's quite different from Chattanooga, where there were lots of opportunities. But I lived on a farm in my early years, and then we moved to town, so to speak, to Newport when I was 6 years old to go to school. And we moved right across the street from where Mrs. Hickey lived, who was the piano teacher. And I'm not really sure how my parents thought that I should be in music, because they were not musicians. No one in my family was a musician. But my mother said that I used to just run around the house screaming high notes all the time when I was a little bitty kid, and I think this is the way she decided to direct my strange behavior. So she called Mrs. Hickey, and she said she would see if I had any talent. And so I remember when they brought the big upright piano into my bedroom, and it was very old because they were just trying out the piano to see if I could actually play anything before they spent some money. And I had my first lesson. I came back, and she said, "How did it go?" And I said, "Great, I know all the notes now." And of course I didn't, but I thought I did. And so that's how it began. Eventually they did buy the real piano that I practiced for many, many years. And Miss Hickey was my teacher from the time I was 6 until I was 17. And she was university trained. She was really a fine teacher, and really brought me out into the world, because I was an only child and shy.
And your first voice teacher.
And she was my first voice teacher. She was not a singer, but she discovered that I had a voice, and she would take me to civic clubs to sing, and she would play for me. I sang on the radio, standing on a big box under a huge microphone on Sunday mornings. Did all kinds of things within the community while I was growing up. Then started playing French horn when I was in the 8th grade. And played horn in the high school band, and was a majorette in the band as well, in the marching band. So quite a checkered career.
And you sang in various groups.
Yes, I was the accompanist for the choir in high school, and my high school choral director, whose name was Bob Moody, was a very big influence. He had been a student of Miss Hickey. He was a fine pianist. He went off to college at East Tennessee State, came back to Newport, and was the band director just as I was entering high school. And so that was a really marvelous thing too, because he was very creative. He created lots of musical theater productions that I loved and was in. I sang in jazz groups, and I played for his choir. And so it was just a sort of a little bit of a community there that I wasn't expecting at all. So
it sounded like you were destined for the field of music. I mean, that that it was so prevalent and you had this talent. Did you, I mean, when you were preparing for college, could you imagine any other life for you?
Well, no, because the only other subject I was really interested in was psychology. I was very interested in that. But music was really the thing all the way through, and math was never in the picture. And so, you know, it was kind of obvious what I should do. Mm-hmm.
George, did you have any, I mean, when you were preparing for college, was there a talk about, you know, finding some other avenue, or was music your passion as well?
You know, when I told my father that I was going to go into music, I think I was 17, and I was really nervous about telling him because he was a businessman all his life, and we were in the car alone together, and I said, "Dad, I think I'm going to go into music." And he turned to me and he said, "Fantastic." He said, "You know, music is God's greatest gift."
Yeah.
And he was so thrilled, and I'm going, who is this man? You know? Because I never gave it any other thought other than music, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it, but I found out.
Yeah. So as you're both preparing for college, there's an event that happens that brings you together. And I love this part of the story. Who wants to start
I'll start
it?
the story,
Okay.
and he can finish.
That's the way it always has been.
When I was a senior in high school and starting to think about colleges, all of my friends were going to UT Knoxville because it was very close. And for some reason I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go farther away. But my piano teacher, who was also my voice teacher, said, well, you know, they have this huge scholarship at UT Knoxville called the Grace Moore Scholarship in Voice. And so she said, I think you should go and audition. So she went down with me and played for me, and I sang. There were lots of people there who were auditioning. And during that competition, there were named 4 finalists. And I have a picture at home in the Knoxville News Sentinel from that time, which has the 4 of us standing together. And I'm on one end, and then there's a soprano, and then there's a tenor, and there is George. I think it's in that direction. So you can talk.
That's baritone.
Baritone.
Yes, I also auditioned, and I did not speak to Sharon that day because, you know, we were competing against one another. And besides, I thought she was quite lovely, but I also thought she was stuck up. But anyway, so I did not win, and Sharon did not win, but one of us came in second and one of us came in third. I'll let you decide who that is.
Well, what I love about that story, so you get together, but did you even talk to each other? You didn't even talk to each other?
My teacher had told me not to speak to anyone.
Okay.
She said, you know, and that's probably why he thought I was stuck up, because she said, no, you sit over there, you do your thing, and then we'll leave.
And then about, let's see, the very first day at Florida State, I went to Florida State because it was recommended by my band director. And the very first day at Florida State, I was in the hallway, and this young lady walked in the front door, and she came over to me and she said, "Could you show me the way to Mr. Brownagle's office?" And it was this young lady right here. And I said, "No, I can't because I'm new here, but haven't I seen you somewhere before?"
And you recognized her.
I recognized her.
Did you recognize him?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so that's how we met, and we both ended up at Florida State instead of UT Knoxville.
So thankfully, you finished second and third, and not one of you finished first.
That's right.
It
And
doesn't
the,
really
the
matter.
person who finished first never finished the degree.
Oh my, well.
That's right. Which is okay.
I'd like to have a word with that scholarship committee. So Sharon, when you went to Florida State, you had the ability to go to piano. You also had your ability to go to voice. Where and how did you develop your interest also in education, and why?
Well, when I went to Florida State, my piano teacher really felt that she wanted me to be a concert pianist. I had won several trophies with the National Federation of Music Clubs in piano in sophomore and junior and senior year in high school. And so she thought that's what I should do. I really had no idea what I wanted to do, but that's what I majored in when I went to Florida State. And I had a wonderful teacher there. His name was Master Giacomo. And he was an excellent teacher, and I did well, but I realized, I always told my own students, learn to know yourself. And he said to me one day, Sharon, if you want to be a piano major and be a concert pianist, you need to practice a minimum of 5 hours a day, and possibly 7. And I thought about that, and I said, I'm not going to do that.
That's a lot.
I am not going to do that, because I knew myself. I liked people. I didn't want to be in a practice room 5 hours a day. I was also studying voice with a very famous Greek mezzo-soprano named Nikolaidi. And so she encouraged me in voice, so I changed my major to a double major in music education so that I could do both piano and voice but not be a concert pianist. So that's how I changed over to music ed.
Okay. Now, George, did you keep the percussionist part? Were you a singer? What were you exploring?
Well, I was torn also. I was a percussion major. My brother and I, he called me a drummer, never a percussionist. He and I used to play gigs, jazz and so forth. He was a great saxophonist. At Florida State, I majored in percussion, but I also started taking voice because I was interested in that. I asked my wife one day, the young lady here, she was not my wife at the time, I said to her, I don't really like this fellow I'm studying voice with. What do you think? Do you think Nikolaidi would? She said, oh, you ought to audition for Nikolaidi. Sure, she'll take you. And I said, no, I don't think so, because she's, Metropolitan Opera, and she only takes the best, and you are the best. And she said, well, I think you ought to audition. Well, I did audition. And Nikki said, George, do you really want to be a singer? And I said, oh, yes, ma'am, I really do. She said, George, do you really want to be a singer? I said, oh, yes, ma'am, I really do. She said, you go with Sharon? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, yeah, I take you.
She was that impressed.
She was impressed with Sharon.
That impressed with Sharon.
I was his accompanist.
Okay. So how did you manage to get her to go out on a date? That's what I want to know. So we've glossed over, you reunited here on the campus of Florida State.
Yeah, well, it took me 6 weeks to get brave enough to ask her, and it was, I don't remember whether it was homecoming or whether it was just a regular football game. But anyway, we went to a football game, and you had to, at Florida State in 1963.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 63, wow. You had to put on a suit and tie, and corsages everywhere. It was wonderful. Anyway, so very nervous, but finally got to. And then I said to her one day, because I didn't have any money. I mean, it was, back then.
Your accountant.
And I said, I'd like to date you every day of the week, but I just simply can't do that. I said, is it all right with you if I date you once a week? And she said, oh, that'd be fine. I thought, wow, we've got a thing going here, So I ran into my friend Woody one day, and he says, hey, George, I saw Sharon at a fraternity party the other night. I said, what? I know, that's impossible. She and I are going steady. He said, no, it was her, it was Sharon. She was with some guy at a fraternity party. So I got up the nerve to approach her and ask her, and she said,
I said, well, you know, you said only once a week, and life is short. So you have to take other opportunities.
Well, fortunately, you were able to negotiate a better deal.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. It all worked out.
So you both go through and graduate from Florida State. When was the marriage, and where was that in the timeline?
We got married as soon as we graduated, and in Newport, and that was right at the end of graduation in June, and then we worked in summer stock. I had been working in summer stock at the Clarksville theater that Paul Crabtree established there, and he had written a show called Tennessee USA, which was popular for many, many, many years, and the theater is still thriving there. And so I had been working there the summers before, and that summer after we got married, I was supposed to work there again, and they needed an orchestra director. So George became the orchestra director, and we moved there before we moved to Nashville.
And I had gotten an NDEA fellowship, National Defense Education Act, to go to graduate school as soon as we finished this summer job. And so we were off to graduate school. And I wasn't really sure why I wanted to go to graduate school, except for it was the one way at the time of avoiding the draft.
Okay.
And Vietnam was not something I wanted to be a part of. I think I was, well, anyway, I would not have gone to Canada, but anyway, so I was called up 3 or 4 times for a physical during that first year in graduate school, and each time I flunked it. And it was nothing that I did to flunk it. I just simply found out at age 22, 23, I had high blood pressure.
Oh.
And I didn't know it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went into the exciting world of education.
Yes.
And so you went to the Peabody College?
Yeah,
and
Peabody in Nashville, and got a master's degree there. Sharon was teaching, she was teaching in the school system until one day she came home and said, life is, again, too short to be involved in this kind of situation. It was a very bad teaching situation where she was. She was enjoying the teaching, but anyway, I told the chairman of the department, he says, by the way, there's another NDEA fellowship available. So Sharon got one, and so here we were able to do our graduate work, and it was a wonderful time. I had a great major professor in Robert Weaver, great experiences with the music there. The orchestra was great. Everything was good about Peabody, and it was a great faculty, and we got our advanced degrees there. Became very much interested in the idea of teaching on the secondary and the higher education. So,
okay.
Wasn't sure what we'd be doing though.
Now, the connection with Austin Peay, you heard about this job, but you weren't ready to go yet.
No, I really wasn't. I'd heard about the job from the music librarian at Peabody, Shirley Watts. In fact, she's still one of our closest friends. She still lives in Nashville, and she said to me one day, George, she says, there's a choral job open up at Austin Peay State University, and she said, I think you'd be good at it. And I said, where's Austin Peay State University? She said, it's in Clarksville. I said, where's Clarksville? And so anyway, I said, no, I'm really not interested because I would like to finish my dissertation. I was just about, doing pretty well on it. But she said, I think you ought to audition. I think you ought to go. It would be good for you. I came up. Sharon played for me again. I sang 2 songs. They never saw me conduct. They heard me sing 2 songs. There were 3 people that heard the thing, As soon as I finished the second song, they immediately went over to talk to Sharon at the piano.
Well,
So I knew I was in. I knew
everybody has to have an asset.
That's right. That's right. So the next day I was called by Dr. Tom Cowan, and I was offered the job, and I came up, and I was absolutely enthralled with the idea of teaching chorus, because I had done some work with choirs in Nashville and all the time. But to be a director of choral activities, I really didn't know what that was. Too young to think in terms of that. I was 26 when we came to Austin Peay. And Sharon was 25, I think, and she decided she wanted to just teach some piano?
I was going to teach piano and voice at home, yeah. But unfortunately, one of their beloved voice teachers, whose name was Jack Hurt, suddenly died. Tom Cowan called me on a Friday and said, "Can you take his classes on Monday?" And I said, "Sure." So I came over and I took his classes and then applied for the job, and 52 years later, I retired.
Yeah, so we just locked into, that's what I love about this too, is that we, in many ways, the best things in life happen not because of we had planned for this, but because of just the way that things happen.
Yeah, I think, getting prepared for something and then taking opportunities when they arrive. It just so happened that I had the music degrees that were required for that position at the time, because he was teaching mostly music education courses and voice. And so I had the music education degrees, and I had finished my master's at Peabody, and so it worked out.
And one of the things you're talking about is so important. I tried to convey it to all the students that I had, especially the majors that I was dealing with, is the idea of taking the chance or taking the opportunity when it's offered. I had several people come to me and say, I've been offered to write some music for such and such. And I said to them, there's the students. And I said, well, you've had theory, haven't you? Yes. You know about the key signatures, and you know your tonal. You got some ideas about music? Yes. I said, well, why don't you try it? See what happens. I said, the only thing that could happen is they wouldn't like it or something like that, because I never had a composition course in college. I never had a conducting course on the graduate level. I never had an arranging class. And yet, somebody came to me, and I tell the students the story. They came to me and said, in fact, it was Paul Crabtree, and he said, I've been hired at Opryland. He said, could you think you could do some arrangements for me for the shows? And I said, well, sure, I can do that. And I had no idea whether I could do that, but I wanted to do it, and I applied I said to myself, the same story I tell the students. I've had theory 4 years. I know what music is. I sing, so I've got some ideas. I can put them down on paper. So that's how it started, and so that mushroomed into taking the opportunities when they approach you.
And the ability to build this, to work on building a program from the ground up. I mean, you got to make it in what you were wanting it to be.
Yes, it's the thrill of having come to Austin Peay, as far as I'm concerned, because it was an environment where the administration was receptive, the students were receptive. Sharon and I had some talents in certain areas that perhaps many academicians would have thought you know, that's too commercial or whatever. And yet we also did things in the academic side. So to build a program in choral music and voice music was a combined effort. It does not, if the choral director can't get along with the voice teachers, you're having some problems because you're dealing with voices on a day-to-day basis. And you're dealing with the innermost emotions of singers. And it's just a thrill to see them grow and to see the department grow and the area grow. And that's one of the reasons we stayed all those years, because it was so exciting to see the feedback that you would get from the students.
And Sharon, you mentioned that you've really found that you loved to teach voice.
I did. I'm so glad that I didn't open a piano studio here, that I suddenly was thrown into teaching voice, because it never occurred to me that I would teach voice. I just only. But once I had taken his students, and they were so receptive. And I know it was difficult for them, those people whose teacher had died and they really loved him, but they were accepting of, you know, my ideas. And so I knew by the end of the first year that I loved it. And so I taught voice for 2 years and decided to go back and work on a DMA in voice performance at Peabody. The school at that time had a stipend that you could apply for as a faculty member, and I got one of those, and that helped with the tuition down there. And so I was there in residence for 1 year, and then I came back to Austin Peay.
So I love your philosophy that you mentioned a little bit about teaching voice, and the fact that you wanted to help the students find their natural talent, but you also felt like your job was a little bit of a psychologist, because of just all the things. I'm sure when you put yourself out there and waiting for feedback, how difficult and how vulnerable you are as an artist. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's been a lot written about singers and performing and how they're different from instrumentalists and so forth. Having been both an instrumentalist and a singer, it is quite different, because you can always, you know, blame whatever happens at the piano on the piano. You know, the key's stuck or the action wasn't good or something. But the voice is you. It's a personal instrument. And so if people are constantly criticizing your voice, you know, you have a tendency to go within and not want to sing. And so for me, one of the primary ways that I wanted to help singers was to build their self-confidence and to give them opportunities to see how they could go from 0 to 100. And try to get rid of that little man in their head that was saying, you can't do this, you know, you're not able, your voice is terrible. Because most singers have that to some degree. Some don't, but most singers that I taught over all the years had some element of that fear of criticism, which is always there in vocal music. Some people like certain kinds of voices, and some people like other kinds of voices. And if you don't have that kind of voice, there's nothing you can do about that. You just have to accept your voice as being special. No two voices are exactly alike. And so it's learning to love your voice, learning to use your voice, learning to know that you will be criticized, but not taking it personally.
Yes, and when you're a conductor, you are at times auditioning young singers, not only to be in your chorus, but to be soloists. And you have to convey to the student that just because you didn't get the part this time, or just because you didn't get the solo this time, doesn't mean that you are or can't do it, or you are an inferior singer or anything like that. What it means is that I or the conductor or whomever is doing the auditioning has a different idea in mind about what he or she wants to hear. And so I want to hear a darker quality of soprano rather than a higher quality or a more fluty sound of a soprano or for something like that. So both of us over the years try to instill in the students that you're going to get the part one day. Don't worry, because you have talent.
So Georgia, there's so many different things we could go into in terms of while you were here. I do want to talk a little bit about the fact that you were the first director for CECA, the Center of Excellence in the Creative Arts. And did you have any clue when that came on that it would have the impact that it ended up having for all these years?
Wow, that's a difficult question. I knew that because it was such a magnificent award in terms of the idea of the collaborative efforts of 4 different areas: art, music, theater, creative writing, and eventually it grew to other areas. But that was such an incredible, inspiring award that when we got together as a faculty to talk about it, the ideas that were blooming in the room were just, yes, we can make something really great out of this. And so yeah, it was a very exciting time and still is.
We're coming on 40 years of it.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it is due to the fact that there were so many individual faculty members who were dedicated to their own artistic pursuits, and then they could see it and help the students see the same thing, and help the students see that what the center is capable of offering them.
Yeah. So Sharon, again, so many things that we could touch on. You performed at Opryland when it was in Nashville. You went to Austria and sang as well, studied in Austria. You wrote 2 books on performing, and you wrote, I think, for 25 years, this is unbelievable, quarterly articles for the National Association of Teachers in Singing's Journal. Unbelievable. You became so prolific. I'm not surprised now that I know you that as a writer. But I want you to talk a little bit about something that I haven't heard you talk about, which is the new music festival called Dimensions. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
Well, I was always interested in contemporary music. As a student growing up, you play a lot of Beethoven and the normal stuff, Mozart and so forth. But I really loved it when my teacher would give me Bartók or Khachaturian, or one of those contemporary composers. And so I knew from the time I was playing all of that music in high school that that's where my heart was. And when I was an undergraduate, my teacher there at Florida State was very traditional, and so I sang mostly traditional music. I would go to the library, this is the truth, at Florida State, and I would look for any score that had weird stuff on it, that didn't look like normal stuff. And I would take it to the practice rooms and I would practice it, and I loved it. But I couldn't sing it for her because she was straight, And so when I got to graduate school, my teacher there, who was Louis Nicholas, I sang some things for him, and he said, "What are you interested in?" And so I told him. Well, he was also a traditionalist, but he said, "I want to hear some of that. Just let me hear some of that." So during my doctoral work, I did nothing but contemporary music. I did the other kinds of things on recitals some, but he got me into the new music festivals that were there. I sang with a new music group in Nashville during the time, and so I realized that was where my career really should go. So at Austin Peay in 1980, I think it was, There was another faculty member here for a couple of years whose name was Dr. James Martin. He was also interested in contemporary music, and so the two of us got together and started the Dimensions New Music Festival. And that first 2 years, we had some faculty involved. Both of us performed, but then it grew. He left. He was on a temporary replacement of 2 years for a faculty member who was on tenure here. And so he's now at Cornell College in Iowa. We started it in 1981, and I ran it until 2007. And during that time, we did at least 3 or 4 concerts a year. It was very popular. We brought in more than 60 composers. We did many, many premieres of works. We did recordings. And so it was one of the things that I enjoyed most during my teaching time here was doing those kinds of festivals, bringing in guest composers. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting. And George, again, you were writing original musicals for the theme parks, which is remarkable enough for just one person. You could just say, okay, I've done enough right there. But you also did major choral works for internationally renowned conductors. You conducted your compositions with the National Symphony and chorus. But I'm interested in hearing your story about the Country Music USA, because I think the travels of it, the where you did the performances. Can you talk a little bit about the opportunities that it presented to you?
Yeah, in 1974, I took a year's leave of absence from Austin Peay because I had been asked to become director of entertainment at Opryland, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do that, but I took it as a challenge again. See if it works, yes. See if it's something you want to do. During that year, under the auspices of the State Department Cultural Division, Opryland was asked to do a tour of Russia, the USSR, for 7 weeks. And I was asked by my bosses to write a show for that. Well, I wrote a show called Country Music USA, and it had everything in it from folk music, which I happen to have been raised on. I loved it. And so also we had, they had a star headliner at the time. Young people don't remember him at all probably, but Tennessee Ernie Ford was the headliner. We took off for Azerbaijan and Georgia, Tbilisi, and it was really an exciting time for me and it blossomed into coming home from that tour to having exciting 2 or 3 times in the White House performing the show, you know. So it was all serendipity, I guess, is meeting and coming and going. And anyway, but I found out at the end of that year that I'd really rather be in academia, so I returned.
Oh, that's good. But it shows again that you're willing to say yes, and which is again a great message for our students to hear. You know, take a chance at the opportunity.
You can fall flat on your face, which I have done many times, with a show or with conducting something or whatever. But at least you know that you made the effort and you gave it your all, and that's very, very important to do. But also you're going to have a lot of successes along the way.
Yeah. You both were recognized over the years on the Austin Peay campus, also with other organizations for doing outstanding work. I think, George, you mentioned that you had 6 invitations for your choirs to perform at regional and national conventions. You mentioned that, and I'm thinking this is important. Why was that important to, have your students have those kind of opportunities?
It was, first of all, you send a tape into the American Choral Directors Association, which is the national organization that I belong to, and you send a blind it's a blind audition. They don't know who's singing on the tape, and your colleagues are the ones who, or your peers, are the ones who judge your performance, and the students get excited about performing for 6,000 of their peers, because there are that many people in the auditoriums when you go to a national. So we worked our way up to the 1997 performance in San Diego with the chamber singers and it was so exciting for me as their conductor, because it was a proud moment. But also the proudest moment was to see them bubbling after that performance and knowing that they had achieved a certain level of performance that we were demanding of them, but at the same time, they weren't quite sure they could do it, but they did, and that's like a team winning the national championship of some sport. But with choral singing, performing for your peers is really nerve-wracking and exciting.
Yeah, they know, rather than the general audience who just loves singing,
right,
to hear singing, these are people that know how it's done.
Yeah.
Sharon, what about you? What's your proudest? 52 years is remarkable. I can't even imagine it, but I mean, what are some of your favorite memories or things that you're proud of?
Obviously, as a performer, I was really thrilled when I was able to get the NDEA grants to do performances in major cities around the United States, in New York and in Boston and so forth, and in major concert halls, and to do performances on NPR. Those were things that were very special, that I didn't expect, that were really a surprise. I was always thrilled when my students would achieve great things, and I had many who did. They would win the Metropolitan Opera auditions in this region, which for a small school, relatively small, that's really a lot to be said. And also people who were just wonderful, became wonderful teachers and teach in universities all around the country. I have had students who've taught at Ohio State and Elon College and University of South Alabama and all kinds of places. And they're wonderful teachers. And they loved Austin Peay. They were here at a time when, everybody was really enthusiastic, and that was great. And also, I was thrilled to receive the 2 awards here, the Distinguished Professor and the Hawkins Award, things that I never expected to receive.
You're making me want to reapply for a position.
Okay.
Not too late.
I don't know.
And I tell you honestly, I was still enjoying my job when COVID hit.
Yeah.
I mean, if COVID had not come, because it was dreadful for singers, they had to wear masks, I had to wear a mask, you couldn't really hear what anyone sounded like. And so for 2 years, it was, there was very little that could be done. And I retired at the end of that in 2022. I probably would still be here if it hadn't been for COVID. I loved teaching. I loved my students to the last day.
Wow.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that, which I thought we need to talk a little bit about, your company is Patsy Wade and how her support. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that she was very supportive of you.
Well, she was. She started playing for me when I went back to graduate school to work on a doctorate. And I had my master's degree is in piano because I kept going back and forth. And so I called my piano teacher at Peabody and I said, do you know anybody there who would be a great accompanist, because I'm coming back to work in voice? And she said, oh. So she recommended Patsy Wade. I'd never met her. We got together. We were immediately simpatico. It was over a more than 40-year period that we toured around the United States and Europe, and she could literally read my mind. I mean, when I forgot words, she would make up something to take in the place of it, and we would go off stage and laugh together, you know. It was a great relationship. When I wrote my book in 2010, which was a memoir on performance and on singing, I used a lot of stories that she remembered as well as a lot of the stories that I remembered. So it was a terrific collaboration. And if I was singing what I thought was not my normal sound, she was my great ears. She had heard me sing from literally day one to, you know, when I was singing at 69. And so she would say, I don't know about that. Think about that right there. So it's great for a singer to have someone who's heard you all of those years so they can say, oh, something's happening here. Let's figure that out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've for those that may not know, you've been active as an author, which I love your books. And George, you've been very supportive of that, and I think that you know, you have been you stay connected with the community. Mm-hmm. Because it's kind of hard to just separate. I think it's the people here, the people that you worked with, that you called colleagues over all those years, they are an important part of your lives as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. I think we became connected to the community when we first came because Fort Campbell at that time had a theater. And when we came to town, they were doing The Music Man. And so we went out to audition. I was auditioning for Marion the Librarian and
Harold Hill.
And so we got the parts. And so from that moment, we sort of made connections with all of the people in the city and in the community who realized that we sang, and we sang together or we sang separately, and so we began to sing a lot around.
And we had trouble right here.
In River City.
In River City.
We should bring that back just for a special, because I haven't seen you in it. We could do it one more time.
We could do it right here in a
Do it
moment.
one more time.
Yeah, it's been great to be in Clarksville because the community, I mean, they supported everything that we did, truly. I mean, it was remarkable. We were shocked at the support. We were grateful for the support, and they attended the things that we organized or performed in, and you can't ask for more. Mm-hmm. It's just wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Is imagine growing up in the mountain areas of Tennessee over all these years, things achieved, you were even beyond the levels of where you could have imagined?
Oh, for me, definitely, because no one that I knew in Newport did anything like this. It never occurred to me. And one thing I'd just say quickly, my mother actually went to this school. She went here when it was called Austin Peay Normal School in 1941 and 42. And I have a picture of her standing in front of Harned Hall where she lived. But she never talked about the school, and I never considered coming to Austin Peay, so it's bizarre that I ended up at Austin Peay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
George, what about you?
Well, I'm not sure where to begin on this.
Yeah.
I just know that when you are in a community that is as varied in its ideas as this small community was, now it's much, much larger, and you help sort of grow an area, the arts, it's very inspiring, and it makes you very pleased, very happy to be a part of it, and you don't want to leave it.
Yeah.
You know, you want to continue to sing. It's like that baby You know, you don't want to give up the baby. You want to help that baby constantly go on. And so, yeah, there's not much we can do anymore except help and promote. You know, I still would love to every now and then. People ask me, he said, "Don't you miss those choirs?" And I say, "Not really, except every now and then, you know, but it's not a constant thing because, you know, I did music and choirs and conducting for as long as Sharon was teaching here. I was still, even after I retired from Austin Peay, I was still doing the Nashville Symphony and the Nashville Symphony Chorus and writing music and so forth and conducting choirs throughout the United States. So, but it's nothing like coming home.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm glad that the life forces brought you two together and then brought you both here to Austin Peay.
And so are we.
And we are glad to.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your story on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of our listeners and viewers out there for checking out the podcast. Continue to listen and watch as we profile some other retired professors and tell the story of the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.